Hey guys, I'm Garrett, and today I'm going to show you how I made a Klingon knife. So this bad boy is a single-handed weapon called a Jejtaj. Jejtaj. Jejtaj? Jejtaj. I don't speak Klingon. So in the Klingon culture, this thing is used less like a knife and more like brass knuckles. Or, if you're in a pinch, it's great for cutting bananas, lengthwise. Anyway, this build is my official entry into the Art of Geek challenge on Instagram, and this is how I built it. I started by 3D modeling the knife in Rhino to get the design down and figure out the exact dimensions that I wanted. And then, I started in on processing the stock I would need. Using the joiner and the planer, I turned this chunk of black walnut into a usable block before bringing it over to the bandsaw. On the bandsaw, I cut out 2 pieces at just over 1/4 inch each. And then I planed them down to make sure they were nice and smooth. I also planed down the piece of ash I was going to be using for the middle to just under 1/2 inch. And there you have it, stock ready to go. Using the 3D model I made, I cut out the pieces using a CNC. If you don't have access to one of these, you can always print out your own shapes, trace it onto your board, and cut out the profile with a bandsaw, and then just sand down the bevels to get the sharp points. I use the CNC because I have access to one, and I really like it. For the centerpiece and main part of the blade, I did a flip mill, which is simply cutting one side and then flipping the piece over to cut the other side. This allowed me to get the blade edge to match up just right. After cleaning it up, I found the CNC left the sharp edge just a little bit ragged, so I used some 220 grit sandpaper to take off the fuzz and smooth it on out. For some added detail, I used a laser cutter to engrave the Klingon symbol on both black walnut pieces. And now, using wood glue, it's time to make an Oreo. Using a belt sander, spindle sander, and a lot of hand sanding, I cleaned up all the sides and all the excess glue drips. I started with 120 grit sandpaper and then moved to 220 to make sure it was nice and smooth. At that point, it was time to oil it. Everybody loves a good oiling. I used tung oil as the finish because it's one of my favorites and it brings out a nice color in the wood. The only thing left was to wrap the handle with leather. I grabbed some black suede from Hobby Lobby, and because I'm lazy, I used a laser cutter to cut it down to size. I also realized that the rounded corners on the inside of the handle would be a big problem when trying to wrap the leather, so I used a saw and chisel to make them 90-degree angles. To give a little extra thickness, I stuck a piece of leather on each side of the handle with double-sided tape before wrapping the outer layer. At the end of the wrapping, I cut the leather at an angle to make sure it fit in perfectly straight, and then I secured it with some super glue. It turned out pretty. But unfortunately, my butterfingers ended up dropping it like 30 seconds after I finished it up, and I broke off one of the tips. To fix it, I sanded down the broken corner and then glued on a corner of scrap cut off that I found. And then I sanded and sanded and sanded and sanded until I got it to match up pretty evenly with the other point. Overall, it turned out pretty nice though. And here it is. And that's how this guy was built. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to give me a thumbs up and press subscribe on that little subscribe button so that you don't miss any of my other builds. Also, be sure to jump on Instagram and check me out at garrett.slazak, and be sure to follow the Art of Geek Challenge if you're into geeky things. Thanks. I'll see you guys next time. Hello? Or, if you're in a pinch, scraper cutting bananas.